Are you a general aviation pilot in the U.S. and high fees, surly controllers, the ever-watchful eyes of the FAA got you down? Well, we got some info that just might make you feel a little bit better in the hangar.
I used to be a well-respected member of the aviation community, and then I started flying to Cirrus, and that changed.
Oh, that was great until the engine quit.
And all of a sudden I see these explosions and these trees exploding.
I'm walking away a better pilot because of this discussion.
Hello and welcome to this edition of In the Hangar. We're going to talk about what life is like in general aviation in the U.S. compared to everything else in the world. So with me, I have a couple of people very experienced in what the aviation world looks like outside the borders of the U.S. I have Martin Pauly. Martin, thanks for coming on again.
My pleasure,
I appreciate it. And we also have Tamara Griffith. Tamara, you've only been on here like once or
just a couple
10 times, so I appreciate it. Tamara, you have a lot of experience as well in what the aviation world's like outside the U.S. Me, I have none. I don't know what it's like flying general aviation in Europe or even Mexico or Canada. So I want to just launch right into that. Martin, you've got an accent, so you're not from Texas, are you?
That's correct, yeah. I was born and raised in Germany, went to school there, had my first job there, and then ended up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa at the age of 27. And I flew in Germany. I started flying when I was 14 years old, flew gliders, became a glider instructor in the club I was in, and had a great time, flew airplanes later. And naturally, part of the move to the US, which was for job reasons, started flying here in the US, airplanes also, and quickly experienced how different these worlds are.
So you had your equivalent of the private pilot license certificate in Germany before you came here?
That's right.
And okay, so what is certification like in Europe or Germany?
You know, it changed tremendously since I moved from Germany to here. I can tell you what it was like at the time. It was not unlike here, except the private pilot certificate did not include night flying and what they call controlled visual flying privileges.
Controlled visual, is that the equivalent of IFR?
No, it's flying in visual conditions, but with more controls, like using radio navigation. Basically, anytime you go into a Class C or better airspace, you need a special rating. That was it at the time. That has changed since then.
Have they become more like what our FAA is doing? More consistency?
In some ways, yes. Like this controlled visual flying is part of the license today, as far as I know. In other ways, no. For example, the instrument rating, which many private pilots in the U.S. get as a natural add-on as they fly cross-country, it's almost unheard of that a private pilot in Europe gets an instrument rating.
Wow, really?
Instrument rating is clearly meant as something, as a tool for professional pilots. So you get your commercial pilot and instrument rating as a stepping stone to an ATP, but not for private pilots. And the infrastructure at most small airplanes for instrument approaches is also not there.
Wow, okay, so that's a big, huge difference.
It is.
Tamara, you did a lot of stuff in Europe and abroad. What's been your experience with international general aviation?
It's been good. I mean, but it was very, very different compared to what we really do have it very good here in the U.S. as far as our aviation community. FBOs are unheard of over there.
No FBOs over there? Oh, really?
Except at very, very large airports, and you pay through the nose.
You will pay.
Oh, wow.
It was very expensive. Well, my time in Europe, the lack of GA was actually probably the most surprising. Because of their rules, the airway fees, the cost of it for everything they pay for, GA is almost unheard of. It's very uncommon. It was for the wealthy.
Wow. Okay, well, let's talk about it. Then for all the U.S. people, U.S. pilots in general aviation that start getting on a rant about, high FBO ramp fees and this fuel is expensive and the FAA is a pain. What's your take on all that?
Well, I don't think there's any question in my mind that the United States is paradise on earth for any general aviation pilot. In terms of cost, in terms of the freedom and flexibility. Go to an airport at night. Most airports don't have a curfew. You turn on your own lights. None of that exists over there.
Wow.
There's a lot more government oversight, a lot more regulations. Airports are, they can be open, they have published hours, and they have prior permission required hours, and then they have times when they're closed, and nothing you can do will open the airport for a night landing. You're short of an emergency. You just can't go there, you can't take off, you can't land.
Wow. Why? Why is that the case?
Well, the purpose of light general aviation seems to be a different one over there. Here, it's equally legitimate to use light general aviation for recreation, for fun, and for transportation. We travel a lot in our airplanes through the country or
right.
Across the borders even. In Germany, when I flew there, it was very much focused on the fun, on the recreation part. You went
so the gliders
somewhere, gliders or even airplanes. When you fly a Cessna 172, you fly maybe half hour, you land somewhere, you get a snack, and then you return back home. But you do it only in nice weather. You don't do it to visit anything other than the airport you're landing on, because like Tamara said, there's no FBO, there's no crew car, there's no rental car even. You can't get from that airport. And you're short of calling a cab and making special arrangements. So it's really about the pure joy of flying, and that part certainly exists over there, but that's different from the infrastructure we have here and we need here to use it for transportation.
So in Europe, you would do a lot of takeoff and return to the same airport, just fly around and then come back, because there's really no reason to go land at another airport because there's nothing there anyway.
Yeah.
You're not going to refuel. Oh, will there be fuel?
You can get fuel, yes. Mm-hmm. And one thing I would say is, and that's actually something I miss here, many airports have nice little cafes that attract a few pilots that fly in, but mostly people from around, that watch the activity.
Mm-hmm. So
there
are some small cafes, not necessarily an FBO, but there are a restaurant or something like that on the airport.
That is a lot more common there than here, yes.
Mm-hmm. More common there than here. Okay, right. Well, that's something that's an advantage then for Europe. And is Germany, you've talked a lot about your experience in Germany. Is Germany different than the rest of Europe, or is pretty much everybody the same in Europe?
There are some subtle differences between the countries, but I would say the experience in Germany and France and the UK would be fairly similar. If you go to southern Germany, Spain, and Greece, you'd find even less general aviation activities. So it differs a little bit, but maybe you flew more around Europe.
Right, yeah, I flew most of them. Within the average EU countries, the larger ones, we did see a higher. Germany probably had the largest GA, along with UK, but there was the largest of the U.S. registered airplanes in Germany.
Of larger?
They had the largest amount of the U.S. registered airplanes, so I kind of had a bonus there. But we would go over to Poland. It was subtle differences, slight different rules. Otherwise, it was pretty much the same. We get over into Lithuania, Latvia. They don't even know, a small airplane was unheard of. We'd go down to Spain. It was still pretty popular, but again, it was, back to the differences. They didn't always speak English on the radios when we would get there.
Oh, wow.
So it was fun some days. Italy was fun.
Now, I know that a lot of countries have signed on to the ICAO as far as speaking English. Do you find, you were saying that some of them don't, was that just, they still were ICAO signatories, you're at a smaller airport where they just don't speak English? No,
I found that to be true in France, Spain, Mexico. The most was if they were talking to their own countrymen's airplanes, they would talk in their language. So you would, as another pilot in another airplane, wouldn't have a clue what was going on.
So situational awareness kind of goes out the window a little bit.
It did a little bit, yes. And just the same as it would in the cockpit, it was outside not knowing, well, what are they talking about? Because we could plan for holds if we knew everybody was getting into a hold before we got there. No clue. And then, of course, the accents and the problems because they weren't practicing their English when they would talk to us. And then, of course, France they absolutely hated me because of my Texas accent. So I got repeated a lot.
Yeah.
But the other thing was up in the air, the majority of the time, I will say, the majority of the time, English was common, English was used. Accents would throw you, but that's neither here nor there. It's when you got on the ground. Suddenly, language went away.
So if, as a U.S. GA pilot, and let's say I want to go vacation in Europe, can I go get checked out in a 172 and rent it and fly around and have fun in Europe?
If it has an American registration, then yes. And there are
Like a November something.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, and there are quite a few American registered aircraft in Europe, primarily because the flight training, getting your certificate, your instrument rating, is so cheap, right? You can do that in a few weeks. You bring the family to Florida or California, you go to a flight school, family gets a beach vacation, and you come back and you have your private pilot, your instrument rating, your multi-engine, whatever you want. That would take multiple times more the cost to do all that in Europe, and that's why many pilots, I don't have exact figures, but quite a few pilots in Europe have airplanes that are registered with the FAA so they can use their American certificate to fly legally in Europe.
Why is it that way in Europe? Why is it so expensive to chase your ratings and that kind of stuff?
Multiple reasons. I'm not quite sure what started, but we're familiar with the EASA, European, I don't remember what this stands for anymore. Forgot what that was. But EASA was the government, kind of like their FAA, over all of the European rules. And it was Germany, the German planes, and as a mechanic, I was there as a mechanic also. The German planes had to have duplications of certain instruments and special wording on their tires. And
So you're saying they're more restrictive than the FAA is?
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, wow, okay.
It was like everybody wanted a job.
So for everybody that's complaining about the FAA, we have it good here, so keep that in mind. All right, so we talked about how restrictive, how tough it is in abroad compared to how good we have it here. What are some of the good things about general aviation in places like Europe?
Oh, there are some good things over there as well, no doubt. I mentioned the many cafes that are out there, which I wish we had more of here. The high expense kind of forced us to work more together, fly more together, and that creates a kind of camaraderie that is more developed over there than what I found here.
That's interesting. So yeah, I guess adversity brings people together, and so you have closer knit clubs, flying clubs, and things like that.
A lot of flying clubs, a lot of people filling up the plane for a short cross-country flight as opposed to going solo, just because it is so expensive to make more of the money that they have to spend on flying. Another thing that I enjoyed over there is that a flight of 2 or 3 hours could get me to a different country with a different language, different culture, different food. If I go on a 3-hour flight from Iowa, well, there's not that much variety that I'm going to see when I...
Well, you should come down to Texas. A 3-hour flight from Texas can put you into, like, Louisiana, and that's a whole new country. So, okay, so we've talked about how good it is that we have it here at GA. Tamara, if I wanted to... I haven't ever flown out of the country. If I wanted to fly to Mexico, how would I do that? What do I need to have to go on a trip to somewhere in Mexico?
Money. That's your first start.
Why? Because do I have to pay?
You will pay a little more. There will be the fees, and I would say a lot of times the first timers, that are going to go and get interested is, I think I've heard it before, like Universal Air. There's a couple other brand names out there that do the flight planning. They help you, determine what you need, what equipment you need. Are you going to be flying over water or not over water? In Mexico, not. So you don't have to worry about life rafts and immersion suits, thank goodness. They're horrible. But what customs, what port of entry, what radios am I going to be required or not required to have on board?
So what's the name of that organization?
Which one?
Or you're saying
Universal Air is just one of the names
one
that
of
I
many?
know. One of many.
Okay.
I think there was a Shepherd or something as another one. I can't remember all of them.
Okay, so I can go to a one-stop shop that can tell me everything that I need, and I could probably Google that.
You can probably Google most of them, and like I said, they really do help. It's probably worth a lot of the money that you will spend. You're like, oh, it's so expensive, but it's everything.
But if I tried to do it by myself,
doing an ICAO flight plan, knowing what port of entry that you can use to go at what airport, and then are you going to have a handler there? You're going to have someone who can help you with the language, help you with the ground crew, because the ground crew may not speak English at all. You may get lucky in the controller, but not necessarily. And there's some airports you may not be able to go to right away.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, again, back to what night rules do I have? And then, of course, they've got mountains and volcanoes. I flew around to look up.
and then Canada. What do I need to go fly into Canada?
Big word is CAN pass. You might be familiar with it.
CAN pass?
Yeah, I get a CAN pass whenever I went into Canada quite a bit, coming overseas. Canadian customs, going through the Canadian customs, and a lot of times we would have a manifest sent to the Canadian customs when we plan to get there, who all's on board my airplane, what we're carrying, and then we would land, make a call, or talk to Canadian customs. They would give us our pass number. We call it the CAN pass. And now with that number, I can fly just about anywhere in Canada.
Do I need anything other than my certificate and passport, obviously?
Need at least a third-class medical or higher. They will not
Okay.
accept basic med in most foreign countries.
Oh, interesting. No basic med.
No.
Okay. At least at this point. Anything, I'll say basic med, or not basic med, but a third class or better, my pilot certificate, passport, anything else for Canada?
Probably insurance for your airplane, and you may, if your name is not on the registration of that airplane, you may need a letter of authorization to be flying that airplane.
So if I have a LLC that I have the airplane under, I just
You
need to
probably
create.
want a company letterhead saying that, yes, we
Okay.
have allowed so-and-so.
What about a radio permit?
The radio operator's license for you, and then the radio license for the airplane.
And how do I get that?
There's, I believe you can go on FCCI, Google it up. I think I had it, but
Right. I'm throwing a lot of stuff because I'm just curious because I've
Right.
never done that. And so,
right. It's a one
but I've
time.
heard
It really
radio
is. It's a
stuff.
one time
It's easy?
thing. Yeah, for especially as a pilot, it's a one time fee and it's good for life.
And does Mexico require the radio permit?
Yes.
They do too?
Almost all foreign countries require it.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Any last thoughts on how good the U.S. has it compared to international for
I think
general aviation?
what I'd throw out there is that it's easy to take what we have here in the U.S. for granted, but it can change. And I think if we look closely, we can see little bits and pieces of signs of change, with more airports getting closed or fenced in, access to airports getting more difficult or more expensive, with FBOs charging higher fees. So it's a trend that, if we don't push against it and help organizations like AOPA
Right.
Through our support or the airport support networks that are at local airports that are in danger, these organizations deserve our support. My fear is that, by the time people that were born and raised here and have never flown anywhere outside the luxurious American GA environment, but by the time we see the damage, it's going to be too late to repair it.
Very good. So we need to be on guard for that. AOPA is a great organization that's fighting for that. Martin, thank you so much for being part of this.
It was fun. Thank you.
Tamara, thank you as always. And thank you guys for watching. And remember, when you get irritated with flying in general aviation in the U.S., remember that we have it good. And we'll see you guys next time in the hangar.